Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Devolution Recap Series. You guys are having a great weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the show last night. Devolution Power Hour, always interesting, no matter whether it's the Wednesday or the Saturday one. But yeah, this is the recap series. I think I'm going to try to commit to doing this every Sunday at roughly 3:30. So pencil that in. Don't write it in pen. I'm not going to guarantee it because things always happen and come up. But I think this is going to be the time slot for the show regularly until we get through the entire series. So that's fun. But with the recap series, this is where I go through each article as read by Patrick Gunnels, and I pause it for commentary. What has changed? What's the same? Elaborate on some things I wish I would have done differently. But yeah, it's a very fun and enlightening journey through the articles, and it's almost nostalgic in a lot of ways because this was 2 years ago that I started writing this series. And for those who are new, the devolution theory it boils down to Trump knowing that the election was going to be stolen from him, and so he kind of allowed it to happen narratively, but he put some mechanisms in place, some established mechanisms called continuity of government, and he is still in some ways, and we don't know the full extent to which, but controlling things behind the scenes. I think it was Chris Paul who had the metaphor that it's almost like the Biden administration is a baby in a playpen. They're in the playpen. They can do whatever they want in the playpen, but they cannot reach outside that playpen and affect certain things. And I think that's a very worthwhile and pretty much perfect metaphor for it. So yeah, guys, let's dig in right away. Right after this is culture of change. So as soon as we're done with the actual article, I'll send you over there. But those who want to stick around, I will be live on Locals only for a little Q&A after this is done. Only Locals. So make sure you guys are following over there, and you can get a little bit more behind the scene type discussion, which is always fun. So part 4, guys, and all these articles can be found at devolution.link. This is the article. No, I'm going to take the chat off the screen. And let me guys know too if you notice I'm coming in blurry or anything, because last night I was hearing that was happening quite a bit, and I don't know why, but I'm curious if it does it when I do it solo. Okay, there we go. The chat should be off the screen. Okay, we're good. So this is part 4, and at the time of writing this, I was not sure there would be another article or not. This was almost like my conclusion article to what I thought I was going to do, and obviously it's exploded since then with many more articles. It's gotten a lot bigger just because you find more information as you go through. But this was a really fun one to write because of all the parallels that you can draw between Trump and President Lincoln and things that Trump has mentioned about President Lincoln. And there is a part in here where I actually discuss, oh man, like it was my theory of what I thought Trump did. And it may not necessarily be wrong, but I don't know how I feel about it now. I'm just thinking about it. I haven't actually reread it yet, so you'll get my reaction to that in live time. But yeah, we're going to have Patrick Gunnels read this bad boy, and I'll pause it as we go through.
Patel Patriots Devolution Part 4, a wartime president. How can this be real? When January 20th came and went, Trump boarded Air Force One, leaving Biden as the president. I was devastated. Everybody knew the election was fraudulent. There was no possible way Trump was just going to walk away from a stolen election. Then he did. I honestly couldn't comprehend what had happened. Like many of you, I could feel it in my bones that this couldn't be how the story ends. I started searching for answers. The devolution theory was one of the only plausible scenarios I could see playing out, but I always ran into the same question. Devolution isn't meant to be permanent and certainly wouldn't be able to last for 4 years. How does President Trump come back before 2024? The reality is, I don't think he ever left.
Okay, so Number one with this, starting off, that was all true. Like I did feel devastated. I know many people felt the same way. I've spoken before. I've lost some small bets over Trump winning that election, and then I doubled down at like, yeah, well, Biden may have won initially, but Trump is not going to let Biden be inaugurated. There's no way with this fraud. That was totally. I mean, my mindset. That is what got me to search for these alternative scenarios, and that's when I came across Thomas Richter and what he was writing about, and started to dig into myself. Still, this part here, the devolution is meant to be permanent and certainly wouldn't be able to last for 4 years. That is something I think that has evolved in my mindset, because to an extent, I think that is true. I don't think they ever actually envisioned a scenario where some sort of continuity government plan would have to be implemented and it would last for a substantial amount of time. When you look at what continuity government was originally designed for, it wasn't situations like this, or at least that's not what they said. It was nuclear war or nuclear holocaust. Let's say a nuke takes out Washington, D.C., takes out our chain of command, the leadership and everything. Continuity of government is how you get things moving. Maybe there's a pandemic, a natural disaster, whatever it is. A lot of those scenarios, when it's publicly available knowledge that your chain of command has been altered for a period of time, but the chain of command is still there, they're going to be put back into place. The time frame is short, and you almost get them back in there as soon as you can. With something like continuity government, where Trump had to implement devolution in the face of an act of war, a stolen election, there really is no timetable on how long that could last. As long as you set up the protection and safeguarding of those NEFs appropriately, theoretically, it could go on for who knows how long. But when it comes to the legal authority of it, that's probably where it gets fuzzy, if it's not fuzzy enough already. If it goes past 4 years, and let's say, and they steal another election, could it just continue on for the next 4? Did he lose his legal authority then? Does it matter if, maybe he implemented devolution in 2020, still has that authority, whatever. They steal it again. Well, he was the rightful winner again. They stole it again. Does that, it's just fuzzy. I don't know. But yeah, my mindset where I say I don't think he ever left. At this point in time, my thought process on what Trump was and his role in devolution was probably more of a prominent figure, where now I see him, as I've done more research and digging into stuff, especially when you get to part 13, which again is the big devolution article and big executive order, EO 13961. That's where I've really started to more see him as an advisory role. Like, you get the thing set up. If there's something major, you give your advice on, but you have devolved your authority, and that means you no longer have it until it's returned back to you. So anyway.
Throughout his presidency, Trump has often spoken of our nation's founding. Here are parts of his September 17th, 2020 remarks from the White House Conference on American History. Quote, "Our mission is to defend the legacy of America's founding, the virtue of America's heroes, and the nobility of the American character. We must clear away the twisted web of lies in our schools and classrooms and teach our children the magnificent truth about our country. We want our sons and daughters to know that they are the citizens of the most exceptional nation in the history of the world. To grow up in America is to live in a land where anything is possible, where anyone can rise, and where any dream can come true, all because of the immortal principles our nation's founders inscribed nearly 2.5 centuries ago. That's why we have come to the National Archives, the sacred home of our national memory. In this great chamber, we preserve our glorious inheritance, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. On this very day in 1787, our founding fathers signed the Constitution at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It was the fulfillment of 1,000 years of Western civilization. Our Constitution was the product of centuries of tradition, wisdom, and experience. No political document has done more to advance the human condition or propel the engine of progress. We are here today to declare that we will never submit to tyranny. We will reclaim our history and our country for citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed. America's founding set in motion the unstoppable chain of events that abolished slavery, secured civil rights, defeated communism and fascism, and built the most fair, equal, and prosperous nation in human history. The narratives about America being pushed by the far left and being chanted in the streets bear a striking resemblance to the anti-American propaganda of our adversaries, because both groups want to see America weakened, derided, and totally diminished. The only path to national unity is through our shared identity as Americans. That is why it is so urgent that we finally restore patriotic education to our schools. From Washington to Lincoln, from Jefferson to King, America has been home to some of the most incredible people who have ever lived. With the help of everyone here today, the legacy of 1776 will never be erased. Our heroes will never be forgotten. Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their hearts and all of their souls. We will save this cherished inheritance for our children, for their children, and for every generation to come.
This is that was an interesting speech. Reading it again now, or listening to it again, I guess. Just last night on the Power Hour, we pulled up Trump's interview with Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil started pushing on the stupid talking point of, hey, do you think we need to stop with the retribution talk and maybe just rise above it and all these things, as if it's been like both sides right now, right? Like that's when you stop and rise above. Like, I do something to you, you do something to me, we're going back and forth, we won't stop. At some point, one of us needs to stop and rise above. Trump has not done anything to these people. These people have attempted to destroy him. And not only that, these people have committed actual crimes. Trump has done nothing. They've been digging on this man for 7 years, haven't found shit. You can dig on any one of these people on the left, and just based on publicly available information, you can find crimes that these people have done, not to mention the ones that we aren't even aware of. But it's the unity thing. Every time Dr. Phil pushed this message of, no retribution, rise above it, Trump's just like, well, we need to unite the country. We need to unite the country. And in the speech, he says the same thing. The only path to national unity is through our shared identity as Americans. And so I just found that interesting. I haven't fully thought this out, but if you are able to unify America around a common enemy, that's how you bring them to war most of the times, right? Like 9/11, World War I and II, whatever, any war that you get involved in, the people kind of unite around it. 9/11 especially, we went to a war on an imaginary terror, and the whole country was unified around it. What if the current political leadership, the left and all these people, what if they get exposed as people who have attempted to destroy America? If evidence like that comes out, that's how you unify America against a common enemy. I mean, that'd be perfect. But yeah, I love this speech. Just again from September 17th of 2020. And so powerful.
This speech is just one of many examples, but as you can see, President Trump cherishes our nation's founding, honors its founders, and reveres its legacy. This is relevant to my theory for two reasons. First, a man who feels this way about his country would do anything and everything he could to defend it and protect it from those who would seek to destroy it. Second, he would do so in a way that would be justified by the very legacy he is trying to defend. The Constitution has no method for rectifying a stolen election once the Electoral College certifies its votes and a new president is inaugurated. Yet everybody seems to be hung up by the thought that we need to decertify each state as the audits come out. The audits have their role, but I don't think it will be to decertify anything. We need to be thinking bigger. What I haven't seen anybody discussing yet is what if President Trump rectified the stolen election before the Electoral College certified their votes? President Trump wouldn't leave the fate of our nation to something he couldn't control. He is courageous, but he isn't stupid. Once he's no longer president, the viable options available to him become greatly diminished. We have already seen governors, judges, election officials obstruct the audit process. There is no saying what else could go wrong. Leaving everything to hinge on post-election actions of others involves far too much risk considering what is at stake. Donald Trump is too calculated for that. I firmly believe he initiated devolution prior to leaving office, so it only makes sense to me that he also cemented his return prior to leaving office. The two go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm still fully on board with that line of logic. Like, there's no way that Trump would have walked away from a stolen election and allowed these criminals to take office unless he could guarantee his return back. And this is where it gets interesting to how this plays out in the end, because there's so many moving parts to this. And we know this is a narrative warfare. A big part about this is exposing these criminals and also giving the government back to we the people. And the best way to do that is by giving us back our election systems. Like, let us have actually free and fair elections. And then if we still F it up from there and elect people like this, then we deserve it. But we don't deserve what we're even put through right now because these elections are stolen and fraudulent. But yeah, I do believe that he did cement his return. So are they going to allow them to steal the election? Or is him cementing their return actually just, okay, now we're going to landslide victory here? I don't personally see it that way. But I do think how this plays out and when this plays out has already been like accounted for and planned out, gamed out or whatever to a certain extent. And then another part of this, here, I'll go to the actual article, about the Constitution. I do agree that they don't have a method for rectifying a stolen election. I mean, that's clear, but this is one of those debates we have. It's unconstitutional to implement something like devolution. Even if there's no constitutional method for, a stolen election, there's also no constitutional method for a president to do something like this. So there's no way it's possible, right? I hear this rebuttal all the time. And the hurdle I can't overcome in my mind is the one where, yes, it might be unconstitutional-ish for something like devolution to be implemented, but it is 100% certain unconstitutional to allow an election to be stolen for somebody who's completely sold out their country. So many other crimes. Like, he's the face of a criminal organization. We can't just allow them to take office. Like, there has to be something in our Constitution. Maybe it's presidential immunity, like the Supreme Court is ruling on right now. But there has to be some sort of leeway for a president to do things and make those tough decisions when you know that they're coming from the right place and they have the justification for it to defend against attacks like this. It's not good enough for me to just say, well, there's no constitutional method for Trump to implement something like this and walk away. So here's all the authority and everything. Go destroy the country, Biden. There has to be more to that. It just doesn't make sense otherwise. I can't imagine our founders would want it that way. But yeah, so let's keep going. And this is the part I think where it's going to get a little cringy, if I remember correctly, but we'll see.
Invoking devolution and the plans for his return go hand in hand. My theory: sometime between December 7th, when Trump issued Executive Order 13961, Governance and Integration of Federal Mission Resilience, and January 6th, 2021, President Donald Trump used a Presidential Executive Action Document, PEAD, hereinafter pronounced PED, Presidential Executive Action Document, PED, to suspend the counting of the Electoral College votes. I have considered that he may have actually suspended the Constitution altogether. We don't know what that would look like, but I believe it would involve a form of martial law, something I don't see currently. Congress is also still passing legislation which wouldn't happen under a suspended Constitution. Anybody who was fraudulently placed into Congress will be removed, but I think that happens after President Trump makes his reveal. That is why I think he solely suspended the counting of the Electoral College votes. He is still president, and we're in a state of devolution at the moment. Don't worry, I brought receipts.
Yeah, so this is the part a little cringy because I don't agree with this any longer. This is something my mindset has definitely changed. I do believe Trump used the PEDs to do something maybe not necessarily at that time period towards the end. If you remember my part 25, and we're actually going to get into the peed stuff a little further here in this article, but my part 25, I may have just peed myself. Super clever name, I know. This is the one where the language in the Office of Legal Counsel spending reports, back when Obama was there's 48 original peds. And then when Trump gets in here, 2013, 2014, 2015, all of them had, there was currently 56 peds. Okay. The only year that Trump had one of these reviews done, 13, 14, 15, 16, all Obama years. The one year that Trump had was 17, and there was approximately 56. And this wording I thought was so huge. Current, and then approximately, meaning maybe more, maybe less. It was just an interesting change. But I do believe he did something with the peds. I don't necessarily believe it was suspending the electoral college votes. I don't think you needed to even do anything like that. I think you just let them kind of get away with it because he implemented something like devolution, and he has the evidence and the authority to do so because it's a freaking act of war, man. Stealing an election, COVID, whatever it might be, whatever his justification was, I believe he had every right to do it. So I don't think he necessarily had to just suspend the electoral college votes or be that specific. But anyway, and then here too, he is still president. I do not believe that. Devolving your authority by definition means you no longer have that authority that would have made him president. I purely see him as some sort of advisory role, just based on my reading of stuff and what I believe is happening. I do not know for sure. Maybe he is still commander in chief. I personally don't see it that way. But nobody knows for sure. That's the thing. Anybody who does know for sure is not publicly talking about it. Get back to the receipts here.
This document from the University of Michigan Journal of Law Reform has some great information on presidential executive action documents, PEDS. It also discusses continuity of government, COG, and how PEDS play a role within COG planning. If you remember my Devolution Part 3, you'll know why COG planning is important. Here is a good explanation of PEDS. Presidential declarations of national emergency enable the president to use draft classified orders to exercise perhaps even more expansive powers, known variously as presidential emergency action documents or presidential emergency action directives, PEDS. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, defines these documents as final drafts of presidential messages, proposed legislation, proclamations, and other formal documents, including Department of Justice issued cover sheets addressed to the president to be issued in the event of a presidentially declared national emergency. They originated as part of Eisenhower-era planning for continuity of government procedures, which were intended to maintain major government operations during and following a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. The situations in which the executive branch plans to employ such procedures, however, now encompass a broad array of declared national emergencies.
And I would say that a stolen election could likely fit the declared national emergency thing. But one of the things I want to point out here that is definitely interesting, that I wrote about later in the series after I found it, or after it happened, where they talk about PEDS, they're draft classified orders to exercise various powers that a president might have. They're just kind of sitting in wait. They're all ready to go. And then once the situation takes place, he just signs it and hands it off to the agencies or groups that are participating in that one PED, right? Like there's multiple different kinds for different situations. You know what, I actually might even have, let's go back to this article. I think, yeah, so like here they show, this is my part 25. There's back when in 2004, when they were reviewing the PEDS for legality and stuff, they have all the agencies that are associated with them. So there's White House ones, there's DOD, DHS, DOJ, NARA. There's some that are primary, co-primary, lead primary. I mean, there's different agencies that are involved in different PEDS depending on the situation. So like if there's an attack on our energy sector or something, NARA doesn't need to be involved in some sort of PED associated with that, but maybe the DOD might be, maybe DHS, like that's how it works. Department of Energy, obviously. Okay, now back to the definition of PEDs, they're draft orders. In my addendum part 4, I talk about this draft executive order that came out from the January 6th committee. Trump had written this thing on December 16th, I think it was. It was December 16th. It was written up. This would have named Sidney Powell as the special prosecutor, overseeing whether or not our election was. It was basically to interdict in our election process, ordering the DOD to do it, and the special prosecutor was going to review everything, and it would have been pretty darn interesting. But he didn't sign it. He never submitted this, but this is how I almost envision a PED working. It's a draft executive order of kinds, and when the situation happens, you implement it. I think the reason he didn't actually sign this is because he did something else, like implement devolution. I don't think there was any scenario prior to Biden's inauguration, between the stolen election and Biden's inauguration, where Trump could have done something and it not have, torn the country apart. It was already basically torn apart, but the side that they're honestly lucky. The side that had this election stolen from them, we are not a violent group of people. At least we haven't been pushed far enough to be. Maybe that day is coming. I don't know. Maybe 2024 is that year, but it didn't happen in 2020. And so if Trump would have interdicted, I think the left would have manufactured violence. It would have been the summer of love times 100. They had groups waiting. That's why Trump did something else. But anyway, let's keep going with this.
One of the most interesting things I found in this document is an exchange between 2 members of Congress and Colonel Oliver North that took place during the 1987 Iran-Contra hearings. Here we go. There appear to be no publicly available memoranda describing PEDs that are more recent than 1979. News sources and congressional testimony, however, indicate that planning in a similar vein occurred throughout the Reagan years. A remarkable exchange between Representatives Jack Brooks, Democrat of Texas, Daniel Inouye, Democrat of Hawaii, and Iran-Contra conspirator Colonel Oliver North during the 1987 Iran-Contra hearings illustrates this ongoing planning. Representative Brooks says, Colonel North, in your work at the National Security Council, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster? Senator Inouye says, I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir? Representative Brooks, I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, and I wanted to get his confirmation. Representative Brooks was referring to a Miami Herald report that Colonel North and FEMA developed a secret contingency plan that called for, quote, suspension of the Constitution, turning control of the United States over to FEMA, appointing military commanders to run state and local governments, and declaring martial law during a national crisis. The plan did not define national crisis, but it was understood to be nuclear war, violent and widespread internal dissent, or national opposition against a military invasion abroad.
That's damn interesting, guys. And I think I'm going to show the article here, but suspending the Constitution, especially over widespread internal dissent, that's pretty darn fascinating. Suspending the Constitution, putting military commanders in control all over the country and state and local governments, and implementing martial law. Now, I don't think we saw things quite to that degree. I don't believe that has taken place like that. But if you're going to suspend the Constitution, implement some sort of devolution, and put in the guardrails so that only certain things can take place and we're protected in certain areas, which is what I think is happening, it makes it much more plausible that there's a plan in place for something like that, or at least Trump would have had the legal authority and the reasoning to justify it. You know what I mean? But yeah, let's keep going. This gets really interesting.
Here is the Miami Herald, excuse me. Here is the Miami Herald article from 1987, which was referenced above, and a screenshot below. Miami. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North helped write a plan in 1982 to suspend the Constitution and place the country under martial law in the event of a national crisis, the Miami Herald reported. The plan, outlined in a June 30th, 1982 memo obtained by the Herald, was a revised version of contingency plans for dealing with nuclear war, insurrection, or military mobilization, the newspaper reported in its Sunday editions.
Real quick, I just want to point out, again, the plans dealing with insurrection. I'm pretty sure there's a quote from Trump where he says, Trump, the insurrection took place on November 3rd. Election day, January 6th was the protest, Trump said in a statement. What if he's being much more literal than we think? Definitely interesting.
So, in 1982, nearly 40 years ago, a PED was written for President Reagan to suspend the Constitution. PEDs have certainly developed over the years as we have adapted our continuity of government planning. But I can assure you, if there was a PED for the suspension of the Constitution in 1982, then there was one for suspending it in 2020, and there could just as easily be one for suspending solely the Electoral College vote, which would be a less drastic measure than suspending the Constitution completely. You cannot convince me that Trump didn't have a PED prepared for this stolen election. Sure, they held a vote and an inauguration, and right now Biden is in office. However, none of it was real or constitutional. It was a charade, just as Joe's entire presidency has been. Look at this 48-second video from Trump's CPAC speech. Y'all ready for this?
I will say my logic there was sound, in my opinion. I mean, there was a PED for something like that back in 1982. There's more PEDs now than there was then. Things have definitely evolved. And a guy like Trump, who knew the election was going to be stolen, he's been saying for months that the election was going to be stolen. They're going to use COVID to do it. He knew what they did with the Russiagate hoax, everything. There was something in place and planned out for this. Like this wasn't just a, oh shit, what do we do now moment. This was like, they are going to try to steal this election. Clearly, how do we respond to it? And this is one of the options. But this White House speech thing here is pretty fascinating.
Can I play this? Yeah, I can. Maybe.
After witnessing all that has gone wrong in our country in such a short period of time, with our borders, with our economy, with crime, we will take back that glorious White House that sits so majestically in our nation's capital. Beautiful White House, that's small letters. White House, that beautiful White House. And it is the most beautiful house of all. That's small letters. White House, that beautiful White House.
Small letters. White House, that beautiful White House.
What is going on? Notice how he stresses and even points to the W and the H in White House and states that they are small letters. This is significant. Is White House capitalized? Whether White House is capitalized depends on whether it's being used as a proper noun or a common noun. For instance, consider this sentence to understand when is White House capitalized. My brother works in the White House, not capitalized. This sentence is quite different from my brother works in the White House, capitalized. The second sentence with a capital W and capital H means that his brother works in a specific place. That is the United States President's residence, the White House. The first sentence with lowercase w and h refers to a general house that's just white where his brother works. The next sentence with capital W and H means that his brother works in a specific place that the U.S. president's residence is. It's the White House. The previous sentence with lowercase w and h refers to a general place known as the White House where his brother works. One of the reasons why word capitalization matters, because the meaning of a word can change significantly depending upon whether it's been capitalized or not. Whether a name is lowercase or uppercase determines its purpose in a sentence. Trump is giving us an English language lesson by telling us that Joe Biden is not the president, using capitalization. He specifically, explicitly draws attention to it. I can't come to any other conclusion than that Trump is still the president by issuing a suspension of the Electoral College vote. Let me dive into this even further.
Let me stop there even further. Again, that last part, I mean, the White House thing is brilliant. Like the fact that Trump was drawing so much attention to those two letters, and he said White House, beautiful White House, so many times, and then made sure we all knew that there was not capital letters. That is so important. And I do think he is kind of saying that, yeah, Joe Biden is not president. But just because Joe Biden is not president, that does not, this is where my mindset has changed, right? That does not mean that I actually think Trump is still president. He devolved his authority. He's by definition no longer the president until we get back to the reconstitution phase of going back to where things were as normal. And maybe that's what's happening on November 5th this year. I don't know. But this is fascinating, guys, the small letters thing.
Remember what I have been saying during this entire Devolution series. We are at war. President Trump has told us this himself. What did President Trump say? Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office of the White House on Wednesday, Mr. Trump said, quote, "We went through the worst attack we've ever had on our country. This is the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this. And it should never have happened. Could have been stopped at the source. Could have been stopped in China. It should have been stopped right at the source, and it wasn't." He said the attack was the worst attack we've ever had. Worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. It's a powerful statement, but so important for my theory. Both the attacks on Pearl Harbor, and the World Trade Center were responded to by Congress declaring war, and a president at war is a president with a multitude of war powers.
Yeah, this is a big part of it, guys. This next legal case we're about to go through is massive, so make sure you're paying attention. Also, do me a favor, guys, hit that thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate that. And then just a reminder, at the end of this stream, once we're through the devolution part of it, I'm going to be going over to locals only and doing a little Q&A with whoever's over there for a little bit. So make sure you guys are following over there if you want to partake in that.
Campbell v. Clinton, 203 F3D 19, D.C. Circuit Court 2000, was a case holding that members of Congress could not sue President Bill Clinton for alleged violations of the War Powers Resolution in his handling of the war in Yugoslavia. It's certainly an interesting case, but what I found most intriguing was this concurring opinion by D.C. Circuit Judge Lawrence H. Silberman. Quote, "Even assuming a court could determine what war is, it is important to remember that the Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war, which is not necessarily the same as the power to determine whether U.S. forces will fight in a war. This distinction was drawn in the prize cases, 67 U.S. 635, 1862.
We should stop for a second and look up what the prize cases are, because they are pretty important. Should have had this ready to go ahead of time. Okay, prize cases. It was a case argued before the Supreme Court in 1862 during the American Civil War. The Supreme Court's decision declared the blockade of the southern ports ordered by President Abraham Lincoln constitutional. The opinion in the case was written by Supreme Court Justice Robert Cooper Greer. So this is an Abraham Lincoln era case. Abraham Lincoln ordered the blockade of southern ports, and this was ruled constitutional. And it's being referenced here more recently under Clinton versus Campbell on the president's authority. And what this concurrent opinion goes into here is to me, this is like one of the biggest things where it comes to if Trump saw what the enemy was doing, like stealing an election or releasing COVID or whatever, as some sort of act of war, he pretty much has an open book to how he could respond to it. And because of that, you can't question, like it's not illegal or unconstitutional, because only the president can really determine how to respond and to what degree they could respond. And this is where it's interesting when you think of the presidential immunity situation going on with the Supreme Court right now in that Jack Smith case. We are it's essentially lining up with something like this and could potentially grant authority in a way, or immunity to Trump to have implemented something like devolution. And we're getting it to play out while Biden is, quote unquote, in office.
There, petitioners challenged the authority of the president to impose a blockade on the secessionist states, an act of war, where Congress had not declared war against the Confederacy. The court, while recognizing that the president has no power to initiate or declare a war, observed that war may exist without a declaration on either side.
This is big, guys. War may exist without a declaration on either side. Pay attention.
In instances where war is declared against the United States by the actions of another country, the president does not initiate the war, but is bound to accept the challenge without waiting for any special legislative authority. Importantly, the court made clear that it would not dispute the president on measures necessary to repel foreign aggression. The president alone must determine what degree of force the crisis demands. The proclamation of blockade is itself official and conclusive evidence to the court that a state of war existed which demanded and authorized a recourse to such a measure under the circumstances peculiar to the case. If our election was attacked and our presidency about to be hijacked, President Trump was bound by his oath of office to meet the crisis with whatever degree of force the crisis demanded.
So big, guys. This whole thing is so huge. When it comes to the foreign aggression aspect, the thing that just like kind of struck a chord with me, thinking about the cases that Trump is currently going through, the Jack Smith case up in Washington, D.C., where they're currently ruling on the president's immunity. Throughout that case, as far as I'm aware, Trump has been basically defending his comments and his actions around J6 and the stolen election, right? They're saying that he was basically committing an insurrection, trying to overthrow the election, whatever. Trump has made some arguments about the fraud that he saw. Like, one of the arguments was, yeah, there was fraud here. I was doing my duty as president to make sure that the laws are fully upheld and that this election was legitimate. One of the things that we haven't necessarily seen in that case, at least again, I haven't read every single document like maybe Kyle has, so I'll probably have to ask him, but I'm pretty sure there has been minimal, if any, references to foreign interference in the elections. I know there was the executive order was mentioned, but I don't think there was any specific instances about that taking place, just in the Jack Smith case. And why that's interesting is because, if it's true, Trump did mention foreign aspects interfering in our election on multiple occasions. And even in that draft executive order that I showed you guys right here, when we go through this, if we get to, right here, like within the very first paragraph of this thing, there is provide probable cause sufficient to require action under the authority cited above because of evidence of international and foreign interference in the November 3rd, 2020 election. Dominion voting systems and related companies are owned or heavily controlled and influenced by foreign agents, countries, and interests. Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposely designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. In this draft executive order, which I know he never signed, but at least shows you his mindset, he knew there was foreign interference in the 2020 election. But I don't believe he brought that up in the Jack Smith case. And that is just peculiar to me, because if you do consider stealing an election an act of war, which I do, especially if you know that there are foreign actors involved, which I believe there was, and I believe Trump believed that as well, then this is like open and shut. Trump easily, I mean, right here in the court case that we just talked about, the court made clear it would not dispute the president on measures necessary to repel foreign aggression. A foreign actor stealing an election is, by the book, definitionally foreign aggression. So why would Trump not bring that stuff up? Is it because he didn't want to get into that discussion with Jack Smith? Like, it's just interesting. I think there's something there. Again, haven't fully thought this out, but this is why I love doing this recap series. It's because there's things like there's dots connecting in my head that I haven't fully considered before because I haven't done something like this. I typically write the article, edit it a million times, read it a million times but then I kind of move on and I don't get the chance to actually go back through line by line like this. And all my cylinders are firing right now.
Why didn't he say anything prior to leaving office? I think there are a multitude of reasons. If you haven't noticed, we seem to be approaching a political boiling point. Think of all the different situations that appear to be coming to a head. Results from the Arizona forensic audit and other audits getting started. Durham report, big tech lawsuit, the defector, dong. The failed policies of the Biden administration, economy.
Man, what an idiot. I literally said in here, if you haven't noticed, we seem to be approaching a political boiling point. I mean, maybe at the time that was true, but the water wasn't even simmering yet compared to where we are now. You know what I mean? So I was just a little naive at that time.
Trump has clearly started ramping up his public statements, and he's not mincing his words. Trump left office and let Biden play pretend because we, the American people, needed to wake up and take a stand to the corruption that has become the status quo. We needed to see for ourselves the infestation that has taken hold of our government. Not just us MAGA Republicans, but the nation as a whole. I personally think when the Arizona audit is revealed, the dam breaks and Trump announces what he did. Conclusion.
So again, my mindset has definitely changed since that last paragraph in some ways. So everything I said there is true at the end. I personally think when the Arizona audit is revealed, the dam breaks and Trump announces what he did. So two things I would change now if I could go back. I wouldn't just say the Arizona audit. I would just say election fraud because I do think that is the final domino to fall. You expose all like how they run the country, how terrible it is, all the lies from the mainstream media. You expose the corruption aspect and everything else, all these crimes. And then like the final tipping point to piss everybody off is not only are they doing all this bullshit and they're terrible at it, but also none of them were legitimately elected in the first place. Like you change the country overnight by doing this in the proper order of exposure. So the Arizona audit, yeah, that technically could be the one thing that reveals it all, but just election fraud revealed on a scale that is undeniable and so big that nobody cannot talk about it. You know what I mean? Like we need that kind of election fraud exposure. And I think we only get that if Biden steals it again from Trump, but we don't need to get into that debate. But then the second part of that there, where I say the dam breaks and Trump announces what he did, I don't think we're ever going to get that. Unfortunately, I mean, I'd obviously love to have Trump come out and be like, hey, we did all these things. But if they do it properly and do it through, this next election and all these things, they'll never have to. And we'll never be none the wiser. And, maybe stuff will come out in the storybooks 50 years from now, but maybe not even then. But I think we'll be able to know. You'll be able to almost feel it. It'll be undeniable that something did happen to allow all these things to line up the way they have so perfectly. But anyway, this closing part is awesome because there's a lot of Lincoln quotes in here. And the way that Lincoln, is talking, it reminds me so much of Trump and what he was going through and his thought process on whether he should do something like devolution. Yeah, maybe it's not fully constitutional, but is it better to, do something that maybe kind of breaks the rules of the Constitution, or just like not do anything and have the Constitution be totally and utterly destroyed? Like, what's worse here? So love this stuff, and I probably won't pause it as we go through this. Maybe I will. We'll just play it.
There is a brilliant article written by James M. McPherson entitled "Any Measure Which May Best Subdue the Enemy." It covers how during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln assumed numerous presidential powers now specified in the U.S. Constitution. It's worth a full read, but here are the highlights. I know it's quite a few screenshots, but it's too powerful and relevant not to include. Lincoln replied, "That is the point on which I doubt the authority of Congress to act." Chandler was indignant. Alluding to the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, "It is no more than you have done yourself." "Quite true," responded Lincoln, "but I conceive that I may, in an emergency, do things on military grounds which cannot be done constitutionally by Congress."
Like devolving the military to an extent, maybe.
This breathtaking assertion of presidential prerogative left Chandler almost speechless. It should not have. From the outset.
Also, on that first part, let me read that again. I conceive that I may, in an emergency, do things on military grounds which cannot be done constitutionally by Congress. Doesn't Trump have a couple quotes like that about his powers as president back during the COVID era? I'm pretty sure he does. There's the powers that I have. You don't even know the powers that I have. I wish that totally blew that paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure Trump said some very similar things. I'll have to find the clip. Oh, whoops.
Of the Civil War, Lincoln had exercised unprecedented powers as commander-in-chief. 2 years before this conversation with Chandler, the president had told a delegation of anti-slavery clergymen from Chicago that he could, if he judged it necessary, proclaim emancipation in Confederate states because, quote, "As commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy in time of war, I suppose I have a right to take any measure with which may best subdue the enemy." End quote. Whether the measures he took exceeded his constitutional authority was much debated at the time and is still controversial today. What remains certain, however, is that Lincoln vastly expanded presidential war powers and established precedents invoked by several of his successors in later wars. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution states simply that, quote, "The president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States." But the Constitution does not define the functions and powers of the president as commander-in-chief. Lincoln made no secret of these actions, which he justified on the grounds that, quote, "existing exigencies demand immediate and adequate measures for the protection of the national Constitution and the national Union." A year later, in response to charges of dictatorship, Lincoln insisted that, quote, "It became necessary for me to choose whether, using only the existing means, agencies, and processes which Congress had provided, I should let the government fall at once into ruin, or whether, availing myself of the broader powers conferred by the Constitution in cases of insurrection, I would make an effort to save it with all its blessings for the present age and for posterity."
God, that quote literally gives me goosebumps. This whole thing right here. Existing exigencies demand immediate and adequate measures for the protection of the national Constitution and national Union. It became necessary for me to choose whether, using only the existing means, agencies, and processes for which Congress has provided, I should let the government fall at once into ruin, or, and this equating this to devolution. Oh, well, something like devolution is unconstitutional. Okay, well, that's the existing means and processes which Congress has provided. So is Trump just going to not do anything and let the government fall at once into ruin, or whether availing myself of the broader powers conferred by the Constitution in cases of insurrection, which a stolen election is definitely that, or an act of war, however you want to look at it, I would make an effort to save it with all its blessings for the present age and for posterity. You cannot tell me that Trump, knowing an election was coming, that was going to be stolen, he knew they were going to steal it, he told us so many times, that he just allowed it to happen and allowed them to take office. That does not make logical sense to me. It almost gets me pissed off thinking about it. There is no way. And if that is the case, and I've said this before, if Trump knew election fraud was coming, knew they were going to steal it, allowed them to do it successfully, and boot him out, then he did not he was derelict in his duties as president. Because his job, his constitutional order, his mandate is to not do that. It is his duty to safeguard us from foreign actors. He's the chief law enforcement officer, and I think that's another quote of his. It was his duty to stop the election fraud and stop Joe Biden from being inaugurated. There's no way he just walked away.
Lincoln did not define those broader powers conferred by the Constitution. At other times, however, he cited the Commander-in-Chief Clause and the constitutional mandate that the president, quote, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Article 2, Section 3. Later presidents have also invoked these vague provisions to justify far-reaching executive actions, in some cases drawing on Lincolnian precedents. Lincoln believed that, quote, by these and other similar measures taken in that crisis of April through May 1861, some of which were without any authority of law, the government was saved from overthrow. Lincoln had taken an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. This larger duty overrode his obligation to heed a lesser, specific provision in the Constitution, or as a modern constitutional scholar, Michael Stokes Paulson, expressed in an article in the spring of 2004 University of Chicago Law Review, quote, a part cannot be supreme over the whole, to the injury or destruction of the whole.
And that right there, too, is perfect, especially when you have a government that's been so bloated, all these federal agencies. You have Congress, which I believe has been captured and trying to push through this election fraud. I mean, all the bullshit. The judicial system, we've seen how bogus that is recently. You can't just rely on all this stuff and say, yeah, well, there's no method to overturn a stolen election, an obviously stolen election, just because it's not in there. Like, Trump had to do something that was never been done before in order to save the Constitution, and his power to do so was implied. That's why I love this Lincoln stuff, because at the time, Lincoln kind of pushed the limits too. At the time, things could have been challenged, and maybe, yeah, that's not in there. But in hindsight, and maybe in hindsight ourselves, if it ever does get revealed, which again, I don't think it will, but if it ever does in hindsight, I think you can totally justify everything that we've gone through in order to save the country. You had to expose how bad things have gotten. And I think people can understand that, as long as there is some sort of accountability that follows with it. That's what we need, not retribution. We just need some goddamn accountability. That's what's missing.
When Congress did convene on July 4th, Lincoln sent a message explaining what he had done and why. After summarizing the events leading up to the firing on Fort Sumter, the president explained that this attack left him with no choice but to call out the war power of the government, and so to resist force employed for its destruction by force for its preservation. Lincoln had written military power in the first draft, but changed it to war power in the final version. Whether he did so because war power seemed stronger is unclear. Later in the message, he again used the phrase. He had employed the war power as the only alternative to yielding the existence of the government.
Interesting.
Looking back in 1864 to events 3 years earlier, Lincoln asked in a letter to Albert G. Hodges, quote, was it possible to lose the nation and yet preserve the Constitution?
Yes, that's essentially the question that Trump was presented with once they stole the election. If you think back to election night, November 3rd, 2020, middle of the night, Trump comes out after they had just stolen it, all the late night dumping, just dumping ballots in there. And the elections were all paused in like all these key states. And he looked disappointed. And it's not just the fact that, yeah, things were going to turn around. You can kind of see the writing on the wall. But I think his disappointment was that these people that our country in some places believe they have elected to leadership were allowing this bullshit to take place. Like, they were literally going to steal the election from Donald Trump. And this is the question that he's faced with. Like, was it possible to lose the nation and yet preserve the Constitution? I mean, that's what would happen if he did just legitimately walk away and didn't do anything. Because I don't think we could keep the nation at that point if there's nothing else going on behind the scenes. I don't think it's possible. But anyway, let's keep going.
By general law, life and limb must be protected, yet often a limb must be amputated to save a life. But a life is never wisely given to save a limb. I felt that measures otherwise unconstitutional might become lawful by becoming indispensable to the preservation of the Constitution through preservation of the nation.
Yeah, and that's something where, with devolution, the constitutional versus unconstitutional debate, and what Lincoln did, he thought, yes, this might be unconstitutional, but maybe later it'll become lawful because it's going to be indispensable to save our country. And that's something like, yeah, if our country is or has been taken over by these fraudulent elections, if an election is stolen from a duly elected president, like the actual mandate of the people in 2020 was with Trump. And I mean, it's far more now. Obviously, he has the awakening has done wonders for his support. Not necessarily even his support, just the America First agenda support. But if he had the mandate of the people then, like you have to do something. Like that is what the people actually want. They want you to do something. They've given you that mandate. But I don't think something like devolution should ever need to happen again if we have actual election integrity that we can rely on. That doesn't involve technology or what all these things, or maybe it is blockchain. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I'm sure there is some sort of solution that has been thought of by the White Hats, Trump team, whatever. But if we have that, then technically devolution should never have to happen again, right?
Dan Scavino tweets, December 19th, 2020. A picture of President Trump looking at a portrait of President Lincoln.
Okay, this is interesting. Before we go on here, I do want to show, it's my part, I believe it's part 8. Let me double check. Yeah, right here. So there are some interesting tweets posts from Dan Scavino, right? He posted this one. The date on it was December 15th. We find out later through some digging that it actually was, that picture was taken on June 1st. Okay. And I think I actually talk about that specifically in part 6. But here were some other tweets that he had on December 20th. So Executive Order 13961 was December 7th of 2020. Now I'm just thinking back to part 3. Hold on. Let me look at something. Hold for processing. Okay, that's November. Trying to see when Ezra Cohen Watnick gave that speech at Fort Bragg. But I think it was November 18th. Yeah. Okay. So I was a little confused on the dates. But anyway, December 19th, Scavino posts these 3 pictures, and we'll get to this when we get to part 8. But each of these figures are important. And at the time when I wrote this article, I hadn't made that connection yet, where he had all these other presidents in there. I just looked for Trump and Lincoln, and this is what I came across. But very interesting. Boom. I love that article so much. Oh, dang it. I wasn't even sharing the right screen. Ugh, embarrassing. Anyway, I guess I'll read it. Hold on. My bad, guys. I was just listening to Patrick by myself. Trump often compared himself to Lincoln. Like Abe Lincoln, Trump was left to determine what degree of force I must have edited that. No, I didn't. What degree of force the crisis demanded. He acknowledged a war that was already underway, and he used his allotted war powers to fight back. I believe Trump used PED as a way to avail himself of the broader powers conferred by the Constitution in cases of insurrection. The comparison of Trump and Lincoln will only grow stronger. Both did what they had to for the sake of the nation they loved. The best is yet to come. Yeah, this was one of my favorite articles to write. Just the comparisons with Lincoln and whatnot. It's fascinating, and this is, in a good way, this is a good summary of what I believe is fully taking place, other than a couple of the places where I guess wrong. And by the way, guys, if you ever want somebody to be introduced to the devolution, literally go to the website, devolution.link, and have them read or listen to Patrick reading an introduction to devolution, because I go through and it's a great summary. Maybe we should have even started with that thing, but it is kind of fun to go through this in the order that I wrote them. But yeah, guys, I think that's all of them. So I'm going to see if we got any Rumble rants. I'm going to give you guys a little time because I'm going to go over to locals only and do a Q&A. You can ask about whatever you want. I will tell you about whatever. But before we do that, make sure you hit the thumbs up. And I also want to do a quick little ad read. This will work for me. If I can find one, that'll work. There we go. Big tech is suppressing free speech everywhere, and it's clear their censorship campaign is going to get even worse. Without free speech, we won't have a free society. And that's why you need to dump the big tech bosses and join the Truth Social movement right now. At Truth Social, you can get all your news and opinions, set up or join groups based on your hobbies or interests, and make yourself heard on any issue without being squelched by big tech censors. And if you're following us here at Badlands Media, you are very familiar with big tech censorship. We get that all the time. Join the network that is the leading platform for direct, unfiltered access to Donald Trump's social media posts. If you want instant access to all of Trump's announcements, plans, and reactions to the biggest issues of the day, True Social is a social media platform for you. So break free of big tech suppression, strike a blow against cancel culture, and reclaim your rights on America's premier free speech social media platform, and join Truth Social today. And yes, Truth Social has been an interesting player in the fight against big tech censorship. I think their role is only going to continue to grow. You can follow us, all of us Badlands creators, over on Truth Social. That's where we basically had our start of things. So thank you, Truth Social and Rumble, for putting this together. All right, guys, I'm going to head over to locals after I see if there's any rants. Let's see. Oh, we got a couple. Thank you, guys. Secrets, nice to see you. You're starting to become a regular, and I like seeing regulars. I'm here also, Mohap. Or sorry, I read that wrong. I'm here also, Mohap. Thank you, Secrets. PX3, this is about the time I discovered Patel Patriot and Patrick Gunnels. Good times. Thankful that many Patriots now consider both Q and Devolution. Red pills are available to any who would look. Yeah, guys, go back and watch last night's Power Hour or Wednesdays where we talk about that DoD continuity update. The Q drops that line up with that thing are fascinating, like remarkable. The date matching up with the DoD continuity policy becoming an instruction. It went from directive to an instruction, and it's the same date. It's a delta for the thing that says SecDef Instruct 1. I mean, come on, that fascinating stuff. Getaway Driver, thank you both for doing what you do. Your perspective has kept us all sane through these tumultuous times. Where we go one, we go all. Thank you. John Henry Bonds, nice to see you, man. We will have a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. Pompeo, U.S. peace be with you all. The future is bright. We are grateful for Badlands Media. Great episode of DPH Night. Yeah. Thank you. I do find that's another comment that's very interesting. The one from Pompeo, where he says we'll have a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. And then we just weren't, we didn't realize that there was also going to be a third. Maybe that was the thing. Julie JN says, thank you for going back over this. I listened to all of it back in the day from Patrick, but not going to lie, a lot of it is over my head, even still, but love the opportunity to listen again. Yeah, and if you guys want me to like get more specific or detailed with some of the stuff, I'd be happy to do so. You just got to let me know if you have questions. Maybe, I mean, it's tough to find the questions about this specifically in the chat, but if you guys want to throw them in, I'd be happy to answer a few. But I am doing a Q&A on locals after this where people can ask questions as well. So maybe that's the place to do it. But for this one, if you guys have any questions, you can throw them out there. But I do got to give a little shout out to, we got some Badlanders out in Southern California. They're on a super mega yacht for Trumptilla Boat Parade in Newport Beach Harbor this afternoon. I got some pictures. I'll throw these up on the Power Hour next time, but some bad J-Truth's in there somewhere. Sorry, it's hard to see. But, oh, by the way, guys, on our website, Shopify, you can get a phone case. And these things are great conversation starters. I tell you what, leave them upside down at the gym or the bar or wherever you hang out. And yeah, people will ask questions. What else do I got here for you guys? Oh, another rant here. Nope, that's all of them. All right. Well, so guys, I'm heading over to Locals, badlands.locals.com, or if you're watching on Rumble right now, at the bottom of this video, I'll show you where it's at. Hold for processing. Okay. A little inception going on, but let me take my camera off. Okay, right down here at the bottom, underneath the video, it says join. Right next to the Badlands Media thing. First of all, you should be following us so you get notifications when we go live. But if you hit this red join button, it'll take you over to Locals, where you can get the Q&A and ask whatever question you want to ask. So I'm heading over there now. See you guys next week, next Sunday. I'll do this again next Sunday, 3:30, unless something comes up, but that'll be the plan. So thank you, everybody. Gonna shut her down. How do I do this? Okay, local supporters only.